My name is Ava Thorne. For the last 6 months, my world had been the gray, churning chaos of the Bering Sea, where I served as a Navy search and rescue swimmer. My job was to descend from a helicopter into 50-foot waves to pull people from the jaws of the ocean. At 11:07 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I finally touched down in Seattle, dragging my gear bag off the last flight of the night. I rented the last vehicle on the lot, a rugged SUV, and began the 40-minute drive through a thick, swirling snowstorm back to my hometown of Port Sterling, Washington. As I turned onto my street, I saw the porch light was on, a single beacon in the blizzard. Before I could even cut the engine, the front door swung open. A wave of sound, music, laughter, and the warm golden glow of a massive Christmas tree spilled out into the frigid air. I stepped out of the truck and walked up the path, still in my winter flight suit, my boots dripping melted snow onto the hardwood floor I'd personally financed 7 years ago. My father and my younger sister were standing directly under the tree, champagne flutes held high, their faces stretched into grins that looked practiced, almost rehearsed. My dad's voice boomed, loud enough to command the attention of the entire room. "Welcome home, honey. Just in time to hear the news. You're officially homeless now." My sister Chloe lifted her glass, her eyes glittering with a light more brilliant than any of the ornaments on the tree. "We sold it last week, sis. Merry freaking Christmas." A sudden suffocating silence fell over the room. Every face, relatives, my dad's friends, Chloe's clique of aspiring social media stars, was turned toward me, their expressions making it clear that I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't heard. I let my gear bag drop to the floor with a heavy, satisfying thud. I brushed the snow from my shoulders and let a slow, deliberate smile spread across my face, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "The house you two just sold?" I said, my voice so calm it felt sharp enough to cut glass. "It actually belongs to—" I paused, letting the words hang in the air. If you've ever had your own family drive a knife into your back on the one night of the year that's supposed to be about warmth and love, share your story in the comments below. I promise I read every single one, and you never know, your story could be the next one I tell. The wind in Sitka, Alaska that night had plunged to a brutal -40 with the wind chill, the kind of cold that would fuse your eyelashes shut if you blinked too slowly. I had just come off a 12-hour night launch, the crust of salt still stiff on my dry suit. I stumbled back to the barracks, peeled off my gear like a second skin, and immediately hit FaceTime. It was my only lifeline, the one thing that kept me feeling human while I was stationed at the edge of the world. My dad, Rob, answered on the third ring. He was sitting on the living room couch, the same gray sectional I'd bought with the bonus from my first deployment. In the background, my sister Chloe was parading a brand new Chanel handbag as if it were an Olympic gold medal, twirling in a slow, deliberate circle so the camera could capture its quilted leather from every conceivable angle. "Look what came in the mail today," or she squealed, her voice hitting that high-pitched artificial frequency of every influencer's unboxing video I'd ever had the displeasure of muting. A couple of nights after that, she was modeling a pair of knee-high Moncler boots and a Canada Goose parka that I knew, without even looking up the price, cost more than my entire monthly housing allowance. My dad just sat there in the background, a mug of coffee in his hands, wearing the same tired, indulgent smile he always wore whenever Chloe demanded something extravagant. "She's really working hard on building her channel, Ava," he'd said, preempting the question I hadn't even asked. "These influencers, they have to invest in their brand image. It's a different world. You wouldn't get it." I didn't bother arguing. I just stared at the pixelated image of my living room on the screen until the call disconnected. A few weeks later, I was sitting on a toolbox in the hangar between maintenance evolutions, my boots propped up, aimlessly scrolling through Zillow on my phone. It was a habit I'd picked up, a way to watch the equity grow on the one tangible thing in the world I owned outright. I typed in my home address, more out of muscle memory than anything else. The listing loaded instantly. It was the first result. The photos were professional, glossy images taken in the fall when the maple trees in the front yard were still ablaze with color. The front door had been freshly painted a welcoming shade of blue. And there, in stark red letters, was the word I dreaded, pending, with a small, hopeful addendum, backup offers welcome. The asking price was a full $55,000 more than what I'd paid for it with my VA loan 7 years prior. My heart didn't just drop, it felt like it flatlined. I zoomed in on the listing agent's photo, Mark Fletcher, an old buddy of my dad's from his bowling league, a guy who'd stumbled into real estate about a decade ago. I tried calling my dad, 5 times in a row. Each call was a straight shot to his voicemail. I sent a text to Chloe. The app showed she'd read it. No reply. That night, I sat on the edge of my rack in the dark barracks until lights out, replaying every single conversation we'd had over the last 6 months. Every casual, "Don't worry about us, we're fine." Every, "Could you send a little extra this month for bills?" Every time he had masterfully changed the subject when I asked what exactly Chloe was doing for work that allowed her to afford such a lavish lifestyle. My hands were shaking, but I opened my messaging app and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled until I found the name, Jordan Bell, call sign Jordy. We'd been in A school together before she took the JAG route after her first tour. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but I still had her number saved. I sent her the Zillow link with a single terse line of text. Can a POA be used to list a service member's primary residence without their knowledge while they are on active duty orders? Her reply came in less than 30 seconds. Send me the exact address and the grantor/grantee info from your deed. I'll pull the county recorder files first thing in the morning, and Ava, lock down your credit right now. I spent the next 4 hours on a satellite connection that was as unstable as my nerves, screenshotting every text where my dad had asked for a little help for Chloe, every Venmo transfer I'd labeled family support, and the email chain where I had signed the durable power of attorney before this deployment began, naively believing I was just making sure the utility bills and property taxes got paid on time. Jordy sent the first encrypted PDF at 0500 my time. The public index report from the county showed a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, had been opened in my name. The amount was a staggering $150,000. The signature on the document was my father's, acting as my attorney in fact. The report showed the funds had been dispersed to a bank account ending in the last 4 digits of Chloe's debit card. A second PDF landed in my inbox 2 hours later. It was a preliminary contract of sale for my house. The buyers listed as Megan and Kyle Peterson. I recognized Megan's name instantly. She had been Chloe's maid of honor in high school. The contract had been signed 12 days ago, but it was a mess. There was no lender pre-approval letter, no title report attached, and most damningly, no VA occupancy certification, a document I, as the veteran owner, would have had to sign in person. Jordy's final message came through in all capital letters, a clear sign of her own fury. They cannot legally close this deal, but they are moving forward because they are counting on you being stuck in the Bering Sea. Start documenting absolutely everything. I created a new, heavily encrypted folder on my hard drive. I named it Betrayal. I dropped in every file, every screenshot, every bank alert notification. I secured it with a password only I would ever know. Then I went and sat on the cold tile floor of the barracks head, staring at the steel bulkhead until the first rays of dawn broke over the Alaskan peaks. I felt the last frayed thread that connected me to that house, to that family, snap clean in two. The time for asking nicely was over. Jordy became my lifeline, a steady stream of digital ammunition while I stood watch on the flight deck, the wind screaming with such force that the helicopter crews had to chain the aircraft down to keep them from being tossed around like toys. Every new file she sent felt like another punch to the gut. Page 1. The HELOC draw schedule. It detailed 3 separate massive transfers to Chloe's personal bank account, all within 4 days of the credit line being opened. Page 2. An email from Mark Fletcher, the real estate agent, to my father. It was dated exactly 1 week after the HELOC was recorded. "Title looks clean enough for a cash buyer," he'd written. "We can close this in 12 days. No lender, no problem." Page 3. The purchase and sale agreement, signed by my dad as my attorney, in fact. Purchase price, $410,000. Earnest money, a whopping $90,000, clearly marked as non-refundable. The buyers' names were confirmed: Megan and Kyle Peterson, Chloe's best friend and the guy she had married the previous summer. Jordy had attached a digital sticky note to the PDF. "Zero chance this funds," she wrote. "No title insurance company in their right mind would touch a sale with an open lien and a missing VA occupancy cert. But they are racing the clock because they think you're powerless." I forwarded the entire package to my commanding officer with a concise request for emergency leave and a family hardship packet. It was approved in 6 hours. I booked the only remaining seats that could get me from Sitka to the lower 48, a red-eye to Anchorage, a 4-hour layover in the USO, then an Alaska Airlines flight to Seattle. It was a 21-hour door-to-door journey. I think I slept for maybe 90 minutes in total, just rereading the fraudulent contract on my tablet until the words felt burned onto my retinas. I landed in Seattle at 10:07 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The rental car counter had a single vehicle left, a silver Tacoma with studded tires, as if the universe knew I had a battle to fight. I tossed my gear bag into the truck bed, plugged Port Sterling into the GPS, and hit the highway. The snow began to fall halfway over the mountain pass, thick, wet flakes coming down sideways, obscuring my vision. The chains-required signs were flashing ominously, but the state plows were clearly losing the fight. I kept my speed at a steady 45 miles per hour, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the heater blasting on full. Every mile marker I passed was another minute closer to the confrontation. The lake finally appeared on my right, a sheet of black ice reflecting the distant Christmas lights of the houses dotting the shoreline. I took the Northwest Boulevard exit, the one I'd taken 1,000 times before. I turned onto my street and my stomach knotted into a fist, tighter than it ever had on any night hoist over a stormy sea. Every driveway on the block was decorated with glowing reindeer or inflatable Santas. My house, the house, was lit up like a Las Vegas casino. Every single light was on. Wreaths adorned both garage doors. Through the large front window, I could see a 12-foot Christmas tree and the silhouettes of people moving behind the blinds, their shadows dancing on the walls. I killed the engine 2 houses down and sat in the sudden, profound silence, watching the steam from the engine curl and dissipate into the freezing air. The dashboard clock glowed 11:11 p.m. The thumping bass of party music was strong enough to vibrate the windows of my truck. I pulled on my cover, grabbed the binder I had meticulously assembled in every airport lounge between Alaska and home, and stepped out into the snow. The crunch of my boots on the fresh powder sounded deafeningly loud, yet no one came to the door. They were all far too busy celebrating my downfall. I walked up the sidewalk I had personally shoveled for 7 winters, stood under the porch light I had installed after my last promotion, and stared at the gaudy wreath hanging where my American flag was supposed to be. Then I reached for the doorknob, turned it, and pushed the door open. I shoved the door open with my shoulder and stepped directly into the heart of their celebration. The air was thick with a cloying sense of cinnamon candles, pine needles, and cheap red wine. A towering 12-foot noble fir dominated the living room, practically groaning under the weight of white lights and gold ribbon. There were at least 30 people packed into the space, cousins I barely recognized, my dad's old poker buddies, and Chloe's entire squad of ring light-wielding sycophants. They were all holding plastic flutes of champagne, toasting as if they were at a wedding. My dad, Rob, saw me first. He was positioned squarely under the tree, wearing a light-up Rudolph sweater, one arm slung casually around Chloe, the other holding his glass high. He shouted over the blare of a Mariah Carey Christmas song, his words slurring slightly. "Look who finally decided to show up. Sorry, kiddo, but you're a little too late. The house isn't yours anymore." Chloe spun around in a sequined mini dress that was far too short, her hair extensions swinging wildly. She actually clapped her hands together in delight. "We closed escrow yesterday, big sis. Cash deal. We are literally partying in your old house right now. Happy holidays." A wave of laughter rippled through about half the room, as if this were the most clever joke they had heard all year. I stood motionless just inside the threshold, the snow from my cover melting and puddling on the hardwood floor I'd refinished myself 3 summers ago. My pulse was as steady as it is when I'm suspended 80 feet below a helicopter in 60-knot winds. My dad, drunk on the attention, kept going, his voice getting louder. "Family takes care of family, Ava. Chloe needed a clean slate. You were off playing hero in Alaska anyway. We didn't think you'd mind." I finally spoke. My voice was low, almost swallowed by the music, but it cut through the noise and every single conversation died instantly. "You sure about that, Dad?" He let out a barking laugh, as if I'd just proven his point about my naivety. "Positive, kid. It's a done deal." I slowly pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the PDF Jordy had sent me from the county recorder's office. I turned the screen so the entire room could see the highlighted section. $150,000, I announced into the dead silence. "That's the amount of the open HELOC you signed for as my attorney in fact. It's still active, and it's still in first lien position. No title company on planet Earth will insure a sale with an undisclosed senior lien and an active duty owner who never signed an occupancy waiver in person, which means your escrow can't close. Not yesterday, not ever." The Christmas music continued its cheerful assault, but no one was dancing anymore. Megan and Kyle, the supposed new owners, were frozen on the leather sectional I'd bought after my last promotion. Megan's champagne flute slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the coffee table. Kyle's face went as white as the snow blanketing the ground outside. He shot to his feet so fast he knocked over an ottoman. "Rob, you swore the power of attorney made it all legal. You said it was a private sale, no banks, no VA bullshit." My dad's glass followed Megan's, crashing to the floor. Red wine spread across my beige area rug like a pool of blood. Chloe finally found her voice, but it was shrill and cracking. "This is insane. We already paid Mark the earnest money, $90,000. He said it was non-refundable." And there it was, the final piece. "Mark Fletcher?" I said, looking directly at my sister. "The same Mark Fletcher who's had his license suspended twice for failing to perform proper title searches? That Mark? The one who drafted a sales contract with 0 lender approval and 0 VA compliance because he thought he could get away with it?" Megan started sobbing hysterically into Kyle's shoulder. One of my dad's poker friends muttered, "Holy hell," and began to inch his way toward the hallway. I took another deliberate step into the room, my boots leaving wet, muddy prints on the floor. "So let me paint the full picture for everyone here. You are all throwing a party in a house that is still legally titled to me. The buyers have just handed $90,000 to a con artist who can't possibly close the deal. And the bank that holds my HELOC is about to find out that someone tried to fraudulently sell their collateral without permission." My dad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I looked at Chloe one last time. "I hope the fresh start was worth it, little sister, because this is the very last Christmas you will ever spend under my roof." The festive tree lights continued to blink, bright and merciless, as the entire room stood frozen around them in a tableau of greed and stupidity. I walked out of that house without a single backward glance, got into the Tacoma, and drove straight to a hotel to clear my head. By 9 the next morning, I was already entrenched in a corner booth at Java on Sherman, the waterfront coffee shop where the ice on the lake was beginning to break up into large gray sheets. I had 3 full binders spread out on the table in front of me, each one meticulously color-tabbed, highlighted, and flagged like evidence for an impending court-martial. Megan and Kyle arrived looking like they hadn't slept in days. Megan's eyes were swollen and red, and Kyle's jaw looked like it had been clenched for 48 straight hours. They slid into the booth across from me, their gazes fixed on the stacks of paper. I pushed the first binder across the table toward them. "This is everything the county recorder has on file," I said. "Every wire transfer, every text message between my father and Mark Fletcher about keeping this sale off the books, every single lie documented." Kyle opened it with hands that trembled slightly. Megan leaned in, reading the documents upside down, and let out a soft sob the moment she saw the wire confirmation for the earnest money. $90,000 non-refundable, sent on December 23rd. I kept my voice flat and even, the same tone I use when I'm briefing a pilot on a search and rescue pattern. Washington State Statute, RCW 18.85.230 states that a real estate licensee who engages in misrepresentation or fraud is subject to license revocation and severe penalties. Your contract was based on multiple fraudulent premises. You file a complaint today, you'll not only get your $90,000 back, but you'll also be entitled to statutory damages, all your attorney's fees, and likely punitive damages on top of it all. I looked them both in the eye. I will sign whatever affidavit your lawyer needs. I will sit for a deposition. I will testify in open court, whatever it takes. Kyle looked up, his eyes bloodshot with a mixture of anger and despair. "You'd actually go after your own father in court?" A bitter smile touched my lips. He stopped being my father the day he decided my military service was just a convenient source of disposable income. This isn't about revenge. This is about cleaning up his mess. Megan wiped her face with a crumpled napkin, smearing her mascara. "We already moved half of our belongings into the garage," she whispered. "He gave us the garage door codes, told us to start making it feel like ours." I nodded once, my expression hardening. "Then you also have a clear case for fraudulent inducement. Keep every photo you took, every text he sent, every receipt from the moving company. It all goes into the complaint." Kyle didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and dialed their attorney, putting him on speaker right there among the coffee cups and binders. I spent the next 90 minutes walking the lawyer through the entire timeline, page by painstaking page. By the time we stood up to leave, the lawyer was already dictating the opening lines of a civil complaint against Robert Thorne, Chloe Thorne, and Mark Fletcher for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and multiple violations of Washington's real estate code. I was halfway across the parking lot when my phone lit up. It was Mrs. Diaz, my elderly next-door neighbor. "Mija, your father is parked in my driveway," she said, her voice tight with concern. "He's just been sitting in his truck for the last hour. He says the bank just served him with acceleration papers and that Megan's lawyer left him a voicemail threatening a 6-figure lawsuit. He won't leave until he talks to you." I drove the 3 blocks in complete silence. My dad was exactly where she'd said he was, slumped behind the wheel of his Ford F-150, his face a pasty gray, a crumpled envelope clutched in his fist. Mrs. Diaz stood on her porch wrapped in a robe, her arms crossed, watching with the same protective gaze she used to have when I'd come home past curfew as a teenager. I walked up to the driver's side window. He rolled it down with shaking fingers. The bank envelope was soaked with melted snow. "They're taking everything, Ava," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The rental property on 3rd Street, all my tools, even the damn lawnmower. The notice says I have to be out in 30 days. I didn't move, didn't speak. He fumbled with the door handle but seemed to lack the strength to open it. "I didn't know it would come to this," he pleaded. "I swear I was just trying to help Chloe. I thought you'd understand." I crouched down so we were eye to eye through the open window. "You thought wrong." Tears began to stream down his weathered cheeks, freezing before they could even reach the collar of his flannel shirt. Please, Ava, tell them to back off. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll deed the rental over to you. Anything. I stood up slowly, looking down at the broken man in the truck. You don't have anything left that I want, Dad. Not the rental, not an apology, nothing. He reached out a trembling hand as if to grab my sleeve. I took a deliberate step back out of his reach. Don't call me. Don't drive by my house. Don't send Mrs. Diaz or anyone else with messages for me. You made your choice on Christmas Eve. Now you have to live with it. I turned and walked back to my rental truck, pulling away while he remained slumped in the driveway, the snow beginning to pile up on a windshield he no longer had the will to clear. I handed the new, legitimate owners the garage door opener on the front porch and drove directly to the county courthouse to file the reconveyance deed. The clerk stamped it at 2:17 p.m. By 2:45 p.m., the bank had already attached a lease pendens to my father's only remaining asset, the rental property on 3rd Street, effectively freezing it. 48 hours later, his attorney filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy petition at the federal courthouse. The trustee was ruthless. They seized the rental house, the 2014 F-150, every power tool in his garage, and the John Deere riding mower he cherished more than most people. The 341 meeting of creditors lasted a mere 12 minutes. My father walked out of that courthouse with a single plastic grocery bag of clothes and a discharge order that wiped out every dime of his debt, but left him with only his Social Security income and a beat-up old Tacoma the trustee deemed wasn't even worth the cost of towing away. Mark Fletcher's disciplinary hearing was scheduled in Olympia the following month. I took 2 days of personal leave, made the drive south, and sat in the back row of the sterile hearing room. The commission's attorney laid out the evidence with brutal efficiency. No title search, no lender approval, failure to disclose the open HELOC, no VA compliance affidavit. Mark tried to play the "I was just a facilitator" card. It didn't work. The panel revoked his license on the spot, effective immediately with no possibility of appeal. He was escorted out a side door while local news cameras filmed his walk of shame. I didn't smile. I just turned around, walked out, and drove home. Chloe's downfall wasn't as swift, but it was just as complete. It came in pieces. First, the big credit card companies filed their lawsuits in district court. American Express for $42,000, Discover for $58,000, and Capital One for $61,000. Then the private student loan servicer she'd been ignoring for years tacked on another $23,000. Every single judgment against her included a crippling 23% post-judgment interest rate plus attorney fees. Her paltry income from part-time brand deals evaporated the moment the first wage garnishment order hit. Someone, probably Megan, screenshot the public court docket and posted it on a local influencer snark page. Within a week, her follower count was cut in half. I saw her ring light, her backdrop stand, and even her fake fiddle leaf fig trees listed on Facebook Marketplace for pennies on the dollar. I officially got the keys to my house back on a gray, drizzly Thursday in March. The house sat empty and cold. The heat had been turned off, the pipes winterized to prevent them from bursting. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, letting the profound silence wash over me. The Christmas tree was still there, slumped in the corner, a brittle skeleton of its former self. A carpet of brown needles covered the floor, and shattered ornaments lay where someone, probably Chloe, had yanked them down in a fit of rage. I walked right past it without a second glance. Upstairs, my mother's old curio cabinet was the only thing that seemed untouched. I opened the glass door and carefully took out the small cedar box holding her wedding ring, the framed photo of the three of us at my chief pinning ceremony, and the auxiliary pin she had worn with pride every Coast Guard birthday. I slipped them into a padded pouch, closed the cabinet door, and left every other memory and possession exactly where it was. The next morning, I met Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense real estate agent Mrs. Diaz had recommended, at the title company. We signed a 6-month exclusive listing agreement at a 3% commission, and we priced the house $5,000 under the last comparable sale to guarantee a bidding war. The offers started coming in before the lockbox was even installed on the door. 7 offers, all well above asking. I chose the cleanest one, a 30-day close, no inspection, no appraisal contingency. Closing day was crisp and sunny. The buyers, a young Navy couple transferring in from San Diego, did their final walkthrough while I stood on the driveway with 3 simple banker's boxes at my feet. My uniforms, my mother's things, and the shadow box containing my air medal. The husband asked if I wanted to take the flagpole from the front yard. I told him it was his now. He thanked me for my service. I just nodded, handed him a new ring with every key to the house, and signed the seller's closing statement. The moving truck never came. I hired an estate sale company to liquidate everything left inside. The sofa I bought after my first deployment, the dining table I refinished myself, every last coffee mug and throw pillow. They tagged it all, ran the sale over a single weekend, and mailed me a check for $12,000, minus their fee. I endorsed it and sent it directly to the Coast Guard Foundation. I loaded my 3 boxes into the back of my new Tacoma, shut the tailgate, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. The house shrank in my rearview mirror until the curve on Lakeshore Drive finally took it out of sight for good. I didn't feel empty. I felt weightless. I signed the lease on a 3rd-floor walk-up apartment the same week the judge stamped the civil protection order. It was a 1-bedroom with exposed brick walls and windows that faced east over the lake, so the sunrise was the first thing I saw every morning. No garage, no yard, no memories baked into the drywall. Just me and the water. The restraining order became necessary after my dad parked his rust bucket Tacoma outside my new apartment complex twice in 1 week, and Chloe used 3 different burner numbers to flood my phone with rambling, vitriolic voice memos that always started with the phrase, "You owe us." The order was simple: a 500-foot radius, a 24-month term with criminal contempt of court as the penalty for any violation. I slid the certified copy of the order into a simple black frame and hung it over my desk like a diploma I had actually earned. Jordy had a 3-day maritime counterterrorism symposium at the Sterling Lake Lodge that June, so she dropped her sea bag on my living room floor and claimed the couch between her briefings. In the evenings, we sat out on my narrow balcony, our boots propped up on the railing, watching the last of the float planes skim across the glass-smooth surface of the lake and disappear toward the Selkirk Mountains. One night, she came back from the hotel lobby holding a certified envelope by the corner, as if it were contaminated. "Concierge signed for it," she said. "The return address is the Kootenai County Detention Center." It was my father's handwriting, thinner now, the ink smudged in places. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen island. Even though the apartment was already warm, I built a fire in the small fireplace. Jordy poured 2 glasses of Woodford Reserve without asking, slid one across the counter to me, and leaned against the fridge, waiting. I used the same dive knife I kept for cutting hoist cables to slit the envelope open. It contained 5 pages of jail-issue stationery, covered in pencil so hard it had torn through the paper in spots. The first page began, "I know you don't want to hear from me ever again, and I don't blame you. I'm facing 18 months on the fraud plea. They took the house, the tools, even your mother's china cabinet. I just need you to know I never thought it would end like this. I was just trying to keep the family together after she was gone." I read exactly 10 lines. I folded the pages once, walked over to the fireplace, and dropped the letter into the flames. The edges caught instantly, curling black, before turning into fragile ash that floated up the chimney and disappeared into the night sky. Jordy clinked her glass against mine. "To new beginnings," she said softly. We drank in silence as the fire settled into glowing embers. The next morning, I walked into the Verizon store on Sherman Avenue. I stood at the counter and watched the representative terminate my old Washington phone number on the spot. I signed up for a new plan with a new carrier and requested a 757 area code, Virginia Beach. Far enough away that no one from my past would ever guess it was me. I went back to my apartment and systematically deleted every shared cloud album, every family group chat, every photo Chloe had ever tagged me in going back to high school. I blocked every number I could remember, including the main extension for the county jail my father had used. Then I logged into the DEERS military database and updated my emergency contact information to Jordan Bell, Captain, USCGJAG Corps. While I was at it, I changed the beneficiary on my SGLI life insurance policy. When the final confirmation screen flashed green, I stood in the middle of my quiet apartment and just listened. There was nothing. No phantom phone buzz, no ping of guilt, no invisible tether pulling me back toward people who only ever wanted what I could give them. There was only the soft, rhythmic slap of lake water against the pilings 3 stories below, and the quiet hum of a life that finally, completely, answered to no one but me. For the first time since I was 17 years old and had watched my mother's flag-draped casket be lowered into the ground, nobody was waiting for me to come home and fix what they had broken, and I wasn't coming. I dragged the 4-foot Fraser fir up 3 flights of stairs myself, shedding needles the entire way. I had cut the scraggly little tree myself from the National Forest with a $30 permit and a handsaw. It barely cleared my shoulder, and it still smelled of pine pitch and cold mountain air when I finally wrestled it into a stand next to the sliding glass door. I wound a single strand of plain white lights around its branches. No fancy bulbs, no ribbon, no angels, just light. Jordy landed in Seattle that same afternoon, rented a Jeep, and showed up at my door with a duffel bag and 2 bottles of Woodford Reserve. Ramirez, Cho, and Doc, my teammates from the SAR unit, rolled in the next morning. They'd driven straight through from their base after getting off watch at 0400, and they were all still wearing their flight suits. 5 people, 1 couch, 2 air mattresses, and a kitchen the size of a closet. It was perfect. We cooked, like we were still deployed on a cutter. Ramirez manned the small grill on my balcony in the -8-degree wind chill, flipping steaks thick enough to make a Texan weep. Cho took over my 2-burner stove and transformed leftover rice, kimchi, and a can of Spam into something that smelled like home to him and tasted like comfort to the rest of us. Doc spiked the hot cocoa with so much peppermint schnapps, we had to open the balcony door just to keep from sweating. We ate standing up, our plates balanced on the kitchen counter, our boots dripping melted snow on the tile. We traded stories about the swimmers we'd pulled out of 50-foot seas and the ones we'd almost lost. No one mentioned last Christmas. No one needed to. When the plates were empty and the fire was roaring, I pulled a small, flat piece of titanium from my pocket. It had been cut from the tail rotor of a Jayhawk helicopter that had taken a lightning strike off Cape Disappointment. I had spent 3 nights in the hangar with a Dremel tool and a metal file, slowly shaping it into a rough, 5-pointed star, its edges still raw. I climbed onto the coffee table, reached up, and set it crookedly on the highest branch of the little tree. The white lights hit the unpolished metal and scattered tiny shards of reflection across the room, like sunlight on ice. Jordy lifted her mug first. "To the people who show up," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Our mugs clinked. There was no loud cheer. We just drank. Later that night, when the others were asleep in a pile of blankets on the floor and the fire had burned down to glowing embers, I stood at the window, my hands wrapped around a fresh mug of tea. The snow was falling straight down now, silent and heavy, erasing the footprints on the boardwalk below. The lake was a black mirror reflecting the street lamps. The opposite shore was nothing but a dark silhouette of trees and a few distant porch lights from houses that belonged to strangers. I thought about the house on Lakeshore Drive, the one with the big bay windows and the flagpole I would never raise again. I thought about the 10-foot tree that used to stand where my couch was now, drowning in ornaments bought with money I had sent home. I thought about the voices that used to fill those rooms, and how the silence in my small apartment sounded so much better than any of them ever did. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. It doesn't guarantee truth. It doesn't even guarantee love. All it guarantees is that you share a fraction of DNA. Everything else is a choice. And for the first time in my life, every single person asleep on my floor had chosen me, chosen to be here when it cost them something: time, money, leave days, a warm bed of their own. They had crossed state lines in the middle of winter to sit on my crappy little balcony and eat overcooked steak simply because I had asked them to. That was family. The titanium star caught the last flicker of firelight as the logs collapsed into ash. I didn't need anything bigger.